Have you ever wanted to take a ride on your own model railroad train and specifically to hop on the jet job, the local that served the Boeing plant near Everett, Washington? Well, I have, and this video is a summary of the run of this very specialized train that switched cars for the Boeing aircraft assembly plant in Everett, Washington. This is Burr Stewart, and welcome to part 56 of my continuing series of operations on the Burlington Northern Railroad set in 1973. The jet job was a very specialized local switch job that went from Everett's Bayside Yard up to the Boeing plant in Everett. And it hauled specialized aircraft parts cars up the hill to the plant, and it took loaded gondola cars down the hill full of scrap aluminum, mainly. For this video, we're going to use a camera inside the gondola car to see what it would be like to run this train as a crewman on the train during a HO scale operating session where you can see a bunch of giant people wandering around near the layout operating the trains. Sounds like fun, right? The audio quality isn't too good, but it's good enough for us to enjoy this video. Oops, look at that. We had a derailment right off the bat. I'll have to call out the inspectors and see why. But in the meantime, the 050 hook has been quickly called, and we should be back underway shortly. Stand by. This train to our left is the incoming jet job, which arrived from the Boeing plant a few minutes ago. And we didn't get to film that part, but it came in caboose first, and now we need to take that caboose and put it on the end of our train in order to take our outbound loads back up to the Boeing hill. So what our engineer is doing now is running the caboose out to the siding so that we can back onto it for the return trip, and then he's going to return the inbound cars back to the track on the left that they came from. We can zoom in on that action so you can see it a little better. I'll speed it up too, since it's pretty straightforward. Imagine how much you could get done in a real operating session if people could talk that fast. That high-speed steam engine sound you hear in the background is from the narrow gauge steam locomotive that's looping around the peninsula just for fun. You'll see that in a few minutes later in this video. Also above the action here, against the wall, you can see the three engines that are pulling northbound freight up towards Bellingham and Vancouver. All right, well, the inbound cars have been parked back where they were, and now it's just a matter of pulling our train out and shoving it onto that caboose so that it will be able to proceed, bang, over to the Boeing plant. As you'll see in a minute, that's going to give us a double bang. Isn't it interesting how that expansive red affected the color balance of the video camera? I don't know how to fix that yet. There's our caboose up close. And the Jeep on the left is number 1799, which is one of the specially equipped locomotives that had their oil pans adjusted so they could handle the 5% grade on the Boeing spur. That engine will be pulling our train as soon as the switcher finishes making up our train by backing us onto the caboose, which we're now doing. I'm not sure why this switch engine jerked to a stop so suddenly. It's probably a setting in the CVs, and I'll have to look into that. There's nothing like taking photographs or videos of your layout to give you a long do list. Bang. By the way, I've done at least one other video on the jet job here, so I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Well, in the distance you can see that northbound freight turns out to be a unit coal train heading up for export in the lower mainland of British Columbia. Well, now it's time to get number 1799 out of the pocket there and couple it onto our train, and we can get going.
Actually, we might even be able to make a bracket or something that's much more stable over time.
The yardmaster has a lot of switches that need to be lined up for this move.
I'll turn the volume down a little bit there. A little bit more revenue, right?
Well, you can see that unit coal train is still moving northbound on the upper deck. Now remember, when he comes in here and bangs into us, he also has to bang into the caboose. Bang! How is that? 2 bangs for the price of 1. We're always striving for continuous improvement on this channel. Now, I would say it's time for us to leave, but this is reality model railroading, which sometimes means it's like the real thing. You have to wait for another train. In this case, a passenger train, the international scheduled train from Seattle to Vancouver, BC. We need to wait for that before we can take the main line south. And look, there it comes. As you probably know if you've been watching this channel, we're modeling 1973 in the Pacific Northwest. So Amtrak had taken over passenger service, but used a lot of legacy Great Northern, Northern Pacific, SP&S, and Burlington Route cars for their passenger trains out here. So that meet accomplished, we should be able to head out onto the main line.
Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. No.
There we go. On the left, we have the engine terminal and the caboose track in Everett, and then the passenger station. It happens to have a big band swing dance going on. And now to go from the siding to the main, we come to a dummy signal. One day I hope to have that signal working with electronics, but good luck, right?
We have about 5 minutes left, guys. If anything needs tidying up.
Well, that was the dispatcher telling us we only have 5 minutes to finish running this train, but we can do it. Now we're running along the low line in Everett, and I'm going to give you a view from the air of our train so you'll get a little bit better sense of the layout and how this job runs. If you look in the upper left, you can see that steam engine going by that I mentioned earlier. That's on the narrow gauge loop in the center of the peninsula. And of course that yard off to our left is the Delta yard, which is the subject of many other videos on my channel. Now we're coming along the shoreline towards Everett Junction, which is the place where the high line meets the low line, and we also use it to represent Mukilteo. So what we're going to have to do is run through there and then we'll be able to back into the Boeing spur, otherwise known as Japanese Gulch. You can see a little pink foam there. We're under construction with that narrow gauge bridge on the upper left. And one day we'll get that scenery all done, and we'll cover that in a future video. Obviously we have a grade crossing here, but I haven't installed crossing bells yet, but stay tuned for that too. This is the beginning of a double track segment that goes all the way into Seattle's Interbay Yard and beyond. And normally we would do right-hand running, but since the Boeing spur is on the left side of the main line heading south, we left the train on the left-hand main, so we'll just be able to pop right in there. I meant to mention that we're using these open gondolas for the scrap aluminum from the Boeing plant, but in reality they probably would have used box cars or covered gonds to avoid theft. Of course, on my railroad, I glue down my aluminum scrap loads, so I don't have to worry about anybody stealing them. There you can see the trailing point switch off to the left, which we'll be backing into shortly. Before they installed a turntable up there at the Boeing plant, the switch crews had to make sure that each one of these aircraft parts cars was facing the right direction for unloading. I haven't had the courage to ask anybody to do that yet, but if I ever do, you'll be sure to see a video about it. Well, that pretty much wraps up this operation. We're backing up the hill into the Boeing plant, which I can only model with this hidden staging yard. So we'll just back into the staging yard and call it a day. By the way, if you're interested in more information about aircraft parts being shipped by rail, Andrew Klomka has 4 books on this, and I'll post a link to his webpage in the comments section below. I hope you've enjoyed watching this train from the gondola car rider's point of view, and you'll come back and look at many other videos on my channel. And in the meantime, this is Burr Stewart, wishing you much fun with trains.